Hello and welcome to episode 58 of Flesh and Pod. My name is Logan and I'm your host, and with me as always is Darick. Darick, what did you get up to in Flesh and Blood this week?
I did not do an Abby impression this week.
So you did something.
I played one game of Talishar. That was unfortunately it. It was a really busy week for me, like both personally and professionally. And I've also been trying to chase down a bunch of things still related both to Flesh and Blood and other card games. But this was a week of like, okay, it's the new year. Let's track a bunch of stuff down. Let's try to plan like the next 3 to 4 months as far as like events and travel and things like that. So really this was like an administrative week for me, but I did sneak in one game of Talishar.
The administrative week and the sneaking in of one game of Talishar does make it so that you did do something.
I did do
you
something.
also tweeted about it.
I tweeted a lot about it. Yeah,
there's that too. So that counts. Ish,
maybe.
Allegedly. We'll have to go to the tape and figure it out. And I actually played in my 2 armories, which felt like for the first time in, I don't know, like a month, because we have, so theoretically there are 3 armories and it's going to go up to 4 armories playable locally each week here. That's too much for me. My life is fairly busy with this and with other things that go on in my normal day-to-day. Playing 4 armories, even playing 3 armories, really, it just isn't tenable to having any sort of healthy mental lifestyle outside of the game. So 2 is pretty much my max. But both were CC, so that was kind of nice going into ProQuest season. I played Briar in the first one, and I think it was 2-2, but I played some very tight games against people that know what they're doing. So it's encouraging when I'm, that close. Probably a couple of better plays early wins me some of those. You're playing against a Dagon White that's playing Oldham, who wrote, and okay, no free ads. I want to make sure that we all know that we are hashtag no free ads around here. But if you do end up with an opportunity and you want to play Oldham, you need to go find Dagon White's Patreon and subscribe and get his Oldham guide. It is 10 pages of the most complete breakdown of a deck I've seen in the Flesh and Blood space, period. It's notes for every matchup. It's conceptual. What position you should be taking in each matchup. And it's describing and discussing the purpose of every card. So if you are looking to play Oldham, you need to go look at that, because he's a master at the deck. He's very good. And he put a lot into it, and it's a very, very, very well thought out read. So if you're looking into playing Oldham, go look at it.
And I need to just plug real quick that it is different. So if you've read my 10-page expose on Oldham, again, no free ads, mind you, it is not just 10 pages of the words block and hammer alternating like mine is. Mine is just 10 pages of block, hammer, block, hammer, block, hammer. His is different. So if you're looking for a different strategy, it's the way to go.
I honestly thought yours was just 6 pages of block, hammer, and 4 pages of random Oldham swimsuit spreads. That was what I thought it was, but maybe I was looking at somebody else's guide.
No, that's on my Oldham fans account.
Oh, right. I forgot. You're Oldham fans. I very much so forgot about that account. The second armory, I took Darick's Bravo list and got massacred.
Really? What? I want to know what you lost to.
Icelander.
Okay, that's knowingly a bad matchup.
Kodachi Fi.
Interesting.
And Kodachi Fi.
Really?
Yeah.
So I have to know, were you using Anothos a lot?
I was.
That's the problem.
I also think the notes you sent me, I think, were a little incomplete, because in the first matchup, I was like looking at it, I'm like, I really should have Sink Below in here, right?
No.
Okay, well, I left it out. So, and I still got
absolutely
whacked.
No, it's actually funny. Sink Below is not run. It's just the trick is that you're supposed to take one like all right, you're gonna soak. You're just gonna soak with your face. You're gonna take one good turn. It's usually about 20 damage, and it's frightening for a lot of people. Okay. And then you never let the 5 player have a turn again is the way it's supposed to go. And I chuckle because we have some really good 5 players here locally. That's why my main deck, when I sent you the very short notes, I didn't have a time to give you my 10-page write-up because I played a lot of Bravo. But when I sent you mine, I said that mine is main decked for 5, but that's just because here locally, that's like half the field.
Sure.
So that's why I'm heavily considering it for the season, because Icelander is a knowingly bad matchup. You're just forced to race with a deck that's not meant to race, but it's the best you can do. But against Fi, like I've not dropped a game locally, even against people who have won a bunch of our local ProQuest stuff. When they get paired against me, they like groan because they know. But the trick is, like, Anothos is like the worst of the worst turns. It feels bad. You're supposed to just soak a bunch up front, and then every turn thereafter is supposed to be something like very heavy disruption to make their life miserable. So
yeah, I did in the second Kadachi Fi matchup, I did not draw a Crippling Crush until very late. And also the Spinals were in hands with another red. So those felt bad. Yeah. And then in the first matchup, I got to tear asunder a Crippling Crush. And
so that's actually not something that I would have recommended.
They lost their hand.
Well, they lose their hand, but so I don't want to go too into the weeds because this isn't a Bravo broadcast.
I mean, it is a Bravo podcast. That's a Flesh and Blood card.
So traditionally, because this is something that I have ran into a couple of times, traditionally they're gonna, for the most part, like lose their effective hand anyway with just a single Crippling Crush. So in those situations, I usually would still play the Crippling Crush, but just with regular Dominate, because Fi traditionally just doesn't have a way to stop that anyway. It's gonna happen. And then I would Arsenal the Tear Asunder for like a guaranteed double discard the following turn, making them lose their entire hand once versus half their hand twice. Usually the half the hand ends up being better. Plus you're getting the Dominate through twice, because the entire point is like you take a bunch of damage up front, and then all of your disruption also leaks damage through, so you catch back up and then overtake them because they are hitting you with a wet noodle and you're hitting them with these big Dominate swings. And this is a point that makes total sense with some other Bravo players, because they were saying like I never Arsenal Tear Asunder, and I was like, that's weird because I Arsenal it all the time against my aggro opponents because the guaranteed disruption is a big deal. Like, it doesn't seem like it's that big of a deal, but if I'm swinging with 7 Dominate and I'm going to make them discard 2, and against Fi, 9 times out of 10, like that's going to happen. Like, they can't consistently block 7, even the ones that are now more mid-rangey and they're teching in the sink belows, etc. They just don't have enough armor to compete with that consistently, and they don't have enough 3 blocks. Like, very specifically, they have to have one of their 3 blocks and usually the sink below in the arsenal. And if they have that, then they weren't doing anything offensively anyway. You still disrupted them. You're not going to take a bunch of damage back. So I Arsenal Tear Asunder into Fi and Briar quite a bit, actually.
Yeah, that actually makes sense now that you describe it that way. Like, I definitely could have just dominated the Crippling Crush and got 2 cards and probably still been, and then got 2 cards the next turn and been in a much better spot. So that makes total sense. My first real run with the deck, and my brain was a little bit flooded anyway, because that was that day I had just learned Alpha Clash. So that was random, where turns out we are not an Alpha Clash podcast. However, that is probably coming soon. And I show up and I'm playing board games and doing some other stuff, and the manager of the game store is like, hey, we're gonna have an Alpha Clash demo today. I'm like, oh, okay, well, they sent you some stuff. He's like, no, they're locals. And I'm like, I live in Iowa. No one is local to me. And I'm like, wait, what? Yeah, they're from Ames. Oh, okay. Great. Yeah, that seems awesome. And so I sat down and I learned the game from the creators. It's a fun game. They handed me a bunch of swag, which is sweet. And so it's And I just, talked about, I work in the content creation space. I do this. I have a podcast about Flesh and Blood. And they're like, oh, cool. And then they're just like, yeah, we've got a lot of Flesh and Blood people that talk about this game. Like the DM Armada's talked about it and Red Zone Rogue. I'm like, hey, he's like, we just had this guy named Charmer messaging us earlier today. And I was just like, Charmer. Yeah, with like a 3. And I'm like, uh-huh. Yeah, that's my podcast co-host. And they're like, oh, okay. Well, yeah, he's been talking. And I'm like, oh, okay, cool. Well, just hand me some extra stuff and I'll send it to him. So I have stuff for Charmer in my bag back here.
I was laughing both when Logan messaged me and he was like, hey, guess what I'm doing? And he sends me a picture of him playing Alpha Clash. And I was like, I was just talking to them. But then I also laughed hysterically when he told me the story because they actually got my name right. Like that was what was the most shocking bit to me.
Not Chamber, not Charger.
Wasn't Chamber, Charmander, Charger, wasn't any of that. They actually got it right. So I was shocked.
Yeah, so Ridge and Garrett, they're quite good people, and it's a fun ass game. Is that a mojito I hear?
That's we're at a one mojito show.
The one mojito show has started. We're going to definitely be updating to a mint leaf for part of our logo at some point. It feels like so for as far as Alpha Clash goes, like again, we're not an Alpha Clash podcast. We're not going to be, but however, there probably will be an Alpha Clash podcast that comes from all this. But they're great people. The Kickstarter is going to be over by the time you hear this episode, sadly. However, the product will release in July for the non-Kickstarter people. If you did Kickstart it, you get your stuff in like May. But they've built an insanely cool platform with their lore is fleshed out. They already have a graphic novel. They already have an actual novel written. It's very interesting, the approach they took. So please, if you get a moment, just check out what they've done. But yeah, so no free ads. But Alpha Clash, well, it's not a free ad. They gave me a bunch of stuff, but the Alpha Clash. But honestly, I wouldn't promote something or talk about something unless I thought it was very good. Same thing with Dagan. If Dagan's article was shit, I would have said, "Go fuck yourself." I'm not talking about this. But
that's
no,
why you've never mentioned my old article that is 10 pages of hammer block.
This is correct. Yes, this is why I have never brought up your Oldham fans. It has never come up in casual conversation or professional conversation. It never will. So that is good enough for me. However, like we need stuff to be. We do need stuff to talk about. We need stuff to be excited about. We need stuff to be happy about because we don't still fucking know where the Pro Tour is gonna be.
Yeah, I was just going to say, we keep saying, okay, well, we're not an Alpha Clash podcast, but we're also not a Pro Tour podcast either because we were told an announcement is coming soon. And then we waited hours and hours and hours and there's still no announcement. So
it is 11:45 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So that's Darick's time. And on Sunday, we delayed recording, one, so I could get hammered and watch Green Bay shit their season away. And then also so that we could see if this announcement would come, because on the Flesh and Blood Twitter account, they tweeted that an announcement was coming soon. Now, we may have varying definitions of what soon is. Soon to me means sometime in the next 24-ish hours. That seems reasonable to me. Soon does not mean sometime in the next week or two, which I think it's probably what they mean. And maybe that's a cultural thing. Maybe that's I don't know what it is.
Well,
but
I had told you they operate on Kiwi time. You have to remember, most places, not the United States, don't assume that soon means now. Right? Like there's a bit of a more like a laid back approach to life in general where
I don't want soon to be now. I want it to be like within a fucking day or two.
No, that's too soon.
Okay. So if somebody was pregnant, so the baby's due soon, they think it's sometime in the next 9 months. Is that where we're going with this? Because then every baby is due soon.
Well, due soon could be like within the next week or two.
God damn it. All right, fine. Yeah, so I'm not, this is not the first time that I have been on recording talking about how very, very fucking frustrating this is. And I know that I know that there are a lot of people out there that very much so agree with that sentiment. They are also very frustrated because the odds are at this point that I'm going to play in multiple pro quests without knowing I guess what is there, but where and when the event I'm trying to qualify for is being held.
Yeah, I think that's a very valid criticism. Like, all jokes aside, and I also love to give LSS the benefit of the doubt because I know they're a small studio and they really have our best interests at heart and so forth. Like, I know their heart is in the right place, but it is a very valid criticism to be qualifying for something, but you don't know when or where it will be, right? Because you could go and try to spike one of these and try hard and then have a wedding that weekend, right? And that's something that if you would have known when you were playing, then maybe you do the other person a solid and you're like, hey, like, I'll give you the invite or whatever. I'd rather have it go to somebody who can actually attend it, right? Locally here, for example, when we knew that it was going to be the Paris event, if people were not willing to go across the Atlantic, like, it's kind of the nice thing to do. If the other person's like, hey, I'm for sure going to go if I get this, then you can kind of step aside, right? So here we don't know when, we don't know where. I mean, it could even be someplace local and I still might not want to go. Like, if you tell me it's in Cleveland or something, like, I got better things to do than to go to Cleveland. So no, I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
That's a shot that I like. If you would have said something along the lines of it's going to be in Flint, then
listen, I would rather go to Flint than Cleveland.
You are fucking high. You are out of your goddamn mind.
I'm also like less than an hour away from Flint, and I don't think Flint's like that big of a deal. But I also, the Cleveland thing is specifically for a buddy of mine that won't even listen to this podcast because he's not a card game player, but
what a dick.
He's a big like Cleveland guy. And so that's just my go-to city. Whenever I want to like bag on a city, it's that by default, but it's not legitimately because I have anything against Cleveland. Like, I actually think they have a really cool zoo and some other things there.
They have the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. That place is fucking gas.
But I do it reflexively. So Mike,
okay.
Mike Binniger, if you ever listen to this, text me and tell me you listened to this. And then also Cleveland sucks. I love you, buddy.
Yeah, St. Louis is my go-to shit city. I fucking despise St. Louis. There's a lot of people I know that are from St. Louis and I like them. I just don't like the city of St. Louis. Like, that's just, everybody's got their thing, right? And the city they don't like, and that's mine. A lot of people at Chicago. Chicago's fine for me.
I don't mind Chicago.
A lot of people hate Dallas.
I don't know if I hate it, but I wouldn't say it's like on my preferred list.
Yeah, I don't. It's not on my times. Yeah, it's not on my list of places I choose to go. I'd rather go to Austin, San Antonio, or Houston if we're just talking about cities in that state. But it's better than St. Louis. That's all I got for it. Detroit's gotten better.
Detroit has gotten better. There was a time where even here as a local, I was like, I don't know if I want to go to Detroit. But last 5 to 8 years especially, it's like really done a great job of turning some stuff around. And there's a lot of like really good walkable spots now where there didn't used to be, and it's
because you get shot better. Yeah. But the sleeper cities are kind of the fun ones. Like Pittsburgh is actually a really cool town. It's every time that I've been there, which is only like 3 times, I think, it's been sweet. I've had a great time. And but Philly, I've spent too much time in the Valley Forge Casino Convention Center, so that's that probably has a lot to do with coloring my perception. But Philly, not so much. Speaking of places, there's an event coming up. Not the Pro Tour, because we still don't know when that is.
We don't know when that is.
We don't. But what we do know is that the Realm is back. And back to doing what they do best. And what do they do best, Darick?
Play Flip It or Rip It with
First Edition
Crucible.
But
also throw really cool events.
Right. They do cool shit. But they do Flip It and Rip It with... They were giving the option for people to play Flip It and Rip It. They weren't forcing the Flip It or Rip It, but the majority of people said, yeah, we're ripping it. So that cold foil Sledge of Anvilheim became 2 pieces of cardboard. But yeah, we're back. The Realm has a circuit this year. It's going to consist of Brawl Weekends. There will be one in quarters 1, 2, and 3. They will be 5Ks, so $5,000, 5 of Keith's Ks up every event on Saturday, and those will always be CC from our understanding. And the winner will qualify for the 20K Invitational in Q4. And then depending on the weekend, there will either be a 1K Blitz that also qualifies on Sunday, or a 2K team event that will qualify people on Sunday. And we are proud to say that the first event we do know will be held on the weekend of March 25th and 26th in the Chicagoland area, partnering with our friends at MinMax Games. We've talked a lot about MinMax on this show and the work they do. They do God's work because they bring the cards that nobody else fucking brings, for one thing. And they're also just good people. They're easy to deal with and easy to talk to. Everything's fair. I mean, I've never heard anybody have a bad experience because they were just treated unfairly by MinMax. So ultimately, like, a really good place for the Realm to partner with. So this will be very cool. And I'm excited to be talking about it, excited to be a part of it. I don't even know if this will be held before the Pro Tour. Who knows? But
Yeah,
I would assume
we don't. I was gonna say we don't know because we don't know those dates. But I will say I want to take just a quick moment to kind of say how shocked I am that you're getting 2 stores like this to really partner. And to me, that just speaks to the dedication that they both have to the actual flesh and blood scene. There are so many people and so many stores that I've personally dealt with where you can still tell very clearly that they are a store that services other games up front, and then they also run Fab. And these 2 really put an emphasis on flesh and blood. They really are not treating it like a side project. They want to be a big part of the community. And so again, to me, that was just like extra special that 2 very well-known outlets for flesh and blood decided to get together and do something really cool for the community. So my hats off to them for making it work.
Yeah, that's a very cool thing. I mean, there are 2 very well-known stores. It is one Speedy nominated store and one Speedy winning store. In the 2, but a lot of times egos take over, right? When you come to these 2 things, and there's a sort of a push and pull, a tug of war for control, and trying to do things your way or having your name higher on the banner or whatever. But a true partnership like this doesn't really come along too often, right? When it comes to this, but I think we're just in the nascent era of flesh and blood enough, especially with non LSS sanctions the wrong word, but non LSS driven events. So yeah. I honestly think that this is very cool, and it's very interesting that these 2 types of stores wouldn't be that are willing to partner rather than compete. I think that's very, very good for the community, and it's good for everybody on the whole. It's also good to see that the Realm is getting kind of out of their bubble. Everything they've done has been so far in Central Ohio, and going and getting out of that comfort zone to spread a little bit and get other communities involved is also just it's awesome, because that's the type of thing that's going to contribute to general growth.
Yeah, and it's going to be growth for the game, but also growth, I think, for both of these stores potentially as well. Because I know that MinMax has, traveled to callings. Like you said, they bring the inventory. If there's some weird random common that you forgot to bring, they usually have it. And the Realm has, as you said, has mostly stayed there in Ohio. But the more that these 2 stores get out of their comfort zone, the more they kind of take on that national presence. Again, that will be better for flesh and blood because, you said LSS driven. I like to think of it as instead the other direction, like grassroots, right? It's really good for the grassroots flesh and blood scene where people are like, yes, we want to be a part of like the big LSS banner events, but also we just really love the game and we love the players and we love the community, and we're going to do something grassroots. Like we can make our own casino with blackjack and hookers. Like this is our bender flush and
No,
listen,
go back to the blackjack and hookers. I'm listening.
Yeah. I saw your face. Listen, it's my future reference. All right, it's flush and
it is
flush and bender.
Flesh and Bender. Yeah, I do remember the proto era. God, I'm old, but there's a show called Duckman. If you're familiar with Duckman,
I am familiar with Duckman. Yeah,
it is one of the greatest shows that nobody pays attention to, because it is utterly fucking hilarious. It's Jason Alexander playing a rundown detective who's also a duck, whose wife had died and is raising his children, one of which is a Siamese twin with two heads, with the twin sister of his dead wife living with them in order to help raise the children, who's just kind of obnoxious in general, and also having to deal with the constant interference of his rival King Chicken. So if this sounds like something you should watch while under the influence of many chemical substances, it totally is.
I think you forgot the best part, which is like the animation is also just, let's be
shit.
honest, not
it's
good.
Bad.
It's not good.
He has an assistant named Cornfed who is a pig. And then has these two bunnies that are stuffed animals as receptionists that he routinely kills every episode in some horrific way.
Duckman is like the spiritual predecessor to BoJack Horseman, like
in a lot of ways, but also Futurama in some ways, not just because of the way the jokes are presented is very there's a lot of crossover. And so getting Jason Alexander voicing it is perfect, because if there's anybody that can sound just like always on the edge of going over, like always staring over that, staring down from that cliff, ready to jump, it's Jason Alexander. He did it in Seinfeld. He did it.
Well, that's why I was thinking about BoJack, because it gives me that same vibe where it's just like you feel like they're just gonna snap, just in different ways, right? Like obviously different ways, but like oh man, I haven't even thought about Duckman in so long, but I do remember it. Duckman's
amazing. Yeah, it's so good. I mean, it's so good at being so bad. I think that's my favorite part of it. We're not a Duckman podcast either, although I mean, if
we're not a Pro Tour podcast either, so
yeah, but say if LSS doesn't give us any Pro Tour information, we just might be a fucking Duckman podcast. I don't know. It seems like we could talk about worse things, like I don't know, chlamydia. That's worse. First thing that came to mind, I guess. I don't know why the clap is the first time I oh right, because I watched Green Bay play football. This was not good.
Yeah, as a Michigander, I'm trying really hard not to rub it in, because we're still only on one beer for the show so far. I know you're pretty well.
We're well deep, sir. Like this is
I mean for the show.
So yeah, step one, we are drinking Tall Boys, so we're on 16 ounces a shot. I think this one's 5. So we're going to be on the path of 80 ounces of beer before this show is done. And that's par for the course, really. When shit's going like it's going, we can't get an answer from LSS on when the Pro Tour is, and we're just kind of filling air. Honestly, it's the shitty part of being a content creator right now, especially a news and notes content creator.
Yeah.
Is we're just basically stymied. We are
doing what 24-hour news channels do when there is no news, which is we're just coming up with ridiculous stuff. Like we're like, hey, no free advertising. However, let me tell you about Alpha Clash and the Realm games and Duckman, but no free ads.
Well, okay. Like, some of those aren't necessarily free ads. You're often employed by the Realm to
but I'm
do coverage.
I'm not paid to bring this up. I haven't signed any contracts. I don't know if I'm doing coverage for them or if I'm going to be attending as a player or anything like that. Obviously, anytime Keith says like, "Hey, I'd like you to do commentary," I'm going to say yes, because Keith is fantastic, and I love the work that he does. But I mean, we haven't had any talks or anything. That's my point. It's not it's no free advertising because I'm not being paid to say anything. As you said, you have Alpha Clash stuff for me, but they haven't given me anything yet. So,
That's true.
I'm
But
not getting paid for that.
we are 100% not a Duckman podcast. We are 100% not no free ads for a show that was canceled in like 1998.
I was gonna say late 90s. Yeah.
That is a stab in the dark. I did not Google. So
Now I need
fine.
to know.
Yep, we're gonna Google Duckman. Great radio right here, right now. But like again, what else?
Original release was 94
through 97.
97. You were pretty close.
I was close. There are 4 seasons starting in 94, March of 94. Yeah, I mean that's all right. God, just such a good show. I don't understand why I like it. Well, I know I am a depraved individual. I totally understand why I love this show. But yes, Duckman. This is your homework. Your homework for the week, listeners, is to
not to be confused with Donald Duck or Darkwing Duck or Scrooge McDuck.
Although
Duckman.
Or DuckTales. Not DuckTales.
Ooh.
Nice. Although Howard the Duck is its own thing.
Howard the Duck is its own thing.
The show that the movie that Lucasfilms tried to bury. So that's just the best way you can put that movie. Tim Robbins doing his level best to not suck. That is the movie. So now you can tell we're really, really struggling for content here. However, we've so far made it a half hour talking about Duckman, Alpha Clash, and bitching about how there's no Pro Tour, with the only real piece of news being the Realm is doing cool shit again. So I'm kind of half calling myself out here because we should be better at this. However, we do have listener questions, and some of them are very thought-provoking, which I appreciate. Please give us more in these downtimes of the news cycle, because that is what's going to make it so that we can fap in your ears. Okay, that was not what I was going for. Longer. I have no way to recover this. The toothpaste is firmly out of the tube.
Actually, Big Lou doesn't really.
No, it doesn't help either.
A rough transition. That's the listener who submitted this question, mind you.
Big Lou's great.
Asked us, what are some ideas or products, past or present, LSS can copy from other card games that you would like to see implemented? Then they go on further to say, personally, I'd love to see them take on the old Magic Invitational idea and let the winners design their own card and have their likeness on it.
So step one, I mean, that would probably have been my answer. That was one of the coolest things, was letting the invitational winners or the winner of worlds design their own card. Now, granted, that came with its own set of problems because a lot of them were just pushed to the moon, and they had to try to tone them down. And then a lot of times in the toning down, the card wasn't good enough, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But some of them
didn't tone them down; they were still really good.
Yeah, if you've never heard of Snapcaster Mage, but. Yeah.
Or even wasn't Dark Confidant one as well? And
yep, that's really Bob Maher.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Shadow Mage Infiltrator, ruled standard.
Wasn't Meddling Mage one?
Yep, that's Chris Bakula.
Yeah.
Nightmare ones. It's sad that I know these. That's the worst part. Tiago Saporito, I believe, was Snapcaster Mage, and John Finkel was Shadow Mage Infiltrator. But they used to design. So what happened, for people that don't know, is if you won it used to be called, I believe, the Magic Invitational, and then later the World Championship, you got to submit your own card design to Wizards, who would then try to include it in a set. So what happened was, most of the time these things were not okay in any way, shape, or form. I think they were supposed to always be limited to being a creature too, but I could be wrong there. However, most of the time they were pushed to the moon, because if you're going to want a card of yourself, you're going to want it to be the coolest thing out there. I get it.
And you're going to want to play with it.
Interesting. Wanting to play with yourself on a podcast whose acronym is FAP. I get it. Well done. And
with Snapcaster Mage anyway.
Well, yeah, with Snapcaster, absolutely. So what this would be like Michael Hamilton gets to design a card, would be the equivalent here, I think. And then that card would be released in the next set with something, some way, shape, or form. You know, they would announce that this is the invitational card. Eventually, they started putting it in the flavor text of the card, in Magic at least, that it was designed by somebody who won the invitational. So like, there's one, the most recent one I believe is Paul Vito da Rosa. But I think one of the cooler things they could do, and they already did dual decks, so we're out on that. Like they've already begun that. So we're good there. But what I would like to see is them to do in the anthology decks, which were, well, I guess there were a gold bordered series of decks.
Oh yeah, the old world champion,
the old Champo decks,
yeah,
where they weren't legal for tournament play, but you could buy a copy of the deck that was gold bordered with a different back, and you would have the deck as it was built that was played by whoever's deck it was at the World Championship. And they would print these, you know, the year after whichever World Championship, and then you could just buy these decks. And so if you wanted to replay Worlds with your friends, you could. Or if you wanted to try out, you know, and say, okay, well, I really want to see what it was like to pilot, you know, let's say that it's Pro Tour 1, and I want to see what it was like to pilot Chain, you know, from the Pro Tour 1 decks. Then you could just buy this gold bordered version for $20 or whatever, $30. And while the cards aren't tournament legal, you could just, you know, you wouldn't have to worry about having to acquire a Grasp of the Arc Knight. And I think they're only like $65 or $70 now. And whatever the other cards in the deck were, you would just have the ability to pick up this whole deck and then play it against your friends or whoever in a casual context, or use it in PvE, since that's a coming thing. I think that product would be very good.
Yeah, that certainly could be fun. So there's a number of ways that I want to answer this. First, I want to start with the invitational idea. I would love to see some version of that, but even if they don't want to release it for competitive play, one of the things that I keep coming back to, and that was beer number 2 for the show officially, probably like 17 for the day.
It's only 8.
I
6.
was halfway there.
I can't remember.
Anyway, I would love to see something where if the card is too pushed, or it's not something that's going to fit thematically for competitive stuff, that we get a PvE version. Like, we already get some of these young heroes that are very clearly not meant for the competitive play anyway. You know, I'm thinking about our Royal Bodyguard friend, for example, from Dynasty, where you look at that and you're like, this is very clearly for the
or
PvE
literally
mode.
Yorick, who's not legal in Blitz.
Yeah, Yorick, things like that. I would love to see, you know, if you win one of these, you get your likeness on a card like that for those modes. Just because, one, I've got lots of hero designs that I want to see implemented, and the only way that it will ever happen is if I can win something and then be like, hey, make my centaur that is allowed to wear 2 sets of legs, for example, or make my young hero twins that you combine to play as the adult hero, and like that's how they work. Or specifically, if I actually won, so all like weird design things I'd like to explore. All jokes aside, the thing that I keep saying that I really want, and if I was ever going to pick something that was my likeness, I want what I call the glow up hero, which is a young hero that is drastically different from the adult version, because when I was young, I was about 100 pounds heavier and I looked way different. And then as an adult, like I thinned up and I got kind of muscular and whatever. And so like, I want the flesh and blood equivalent of that. I want, you know, chunky Charmer as the young hero. Christ. And then I want Chad Charmer as the adult hero, you know, and I want it to like fully thematic. Again, I don't care. Throw me in the PvE. I don't need to be competitive, but like make the young version be like a merchant. And then, you know, I'm a warrior or a brute or something as the adult for the full transformation. I just think that thematically, those kinds of things would be really fun to do. And I want to win an event to get it done. But outside of that, so the other thing that's been kind of weighing on me, and one of the things that first drew me to Flesh and Blood to begin with, was that it was hero centric. And I liked that your hero modified the way you built your deck and the way you played the game, because it reminded me of an old Magic format when they were running arena seasons in like 94, 95. And that was Vanguard. So if you aren't familiar with that, Vanguard was a Magic format where they gave you this like oversized card, and it was usually a character from Magic, and it modified the game for you. So there was like a bunch of Weatherlight crew, for example, in the first run, and so you had like a Sisay card and a Gerard card, and it would modify your starting health, it would modify your hand size, and it would give you an
A
ability, right?
static ability. Yep.
So like think like your hero, but since Flesh and Blood already has heroes, I would like to see them do something that's like Vanguard, but instead is representing a site or a space. Now I know we have the landmark cards already, but imagine like saying like, hey, we're going to play at Volcor, and then this gives you alternate rules for a special game mode. And then again, that's something they could loop back into the PvE mode potentially as well, right? Anything cool like that that can kind of enhance the experience, draw in that casual audience, make you think of like innovating ways to experience Flesh and Blood outside of the just like 1v1 competitive mindset, I think is as a plus. So those are the kinds of things that I would like to see them kind of steal, but make them work for Flesh and Blood because they're a little bit different.
Yeah, and so sadly, I know the question talked about other card games in general. The only card games that I played competitively outside of Flesh and Blood are Magic and Star Wars. There's nothing to really steal from Star Wars that they did that was different, outside of printing the reflection sets.
Yeah.
Which again, that's something you could do but they're already kind of doing that with History Pack, honestly. So
Well, I mean, if they really wanted to steal something, like they could have one of their executives embezzle a bunch of money and then have the studio fold up.
Yes, they could have an executive snort their profits. You are correct. They could do that. But that's, so I don't know what other games do largely, or really haven't had a lot of I know just don't do what MetaZoo does. I know that.
I was just gonna say, so like I think the biggest issue is that you have to have a successful enough game to warrant additional products outside of your base experience, and not many have made it to that point. Like the fact that we're even considering it for Flesh and Blood, to me, says Flesh and Blood has made it, because we are at a point where people are still hungry for more, and it's stable enough and has an interesting intellectual property, and people want more of it, right? So I think that's good news all around for LSS. But the reality is I've played a lot of card games, but almost none of them had any sort of like additional products that you could really get. I mean, yes, there's stuff like Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh, because again, those are big enough that they've done those things. But a lot of that stuff, again, Flesh and Blood is kind of already borrowing from in some way, shape, or form. And I don't know how much heavier they want to lean into it, because I don't think that some of those things will fit thematically with like the world and just the age grouping, I guess is another way to put it as well. So the other types of games, like I said, I'm not going to say, hey, that you should borrow stuff from, the Mech Warrior trading card game, or Marvel Overpower, or Aliens versus Predator, or the Harry Potter card game, or the Spoils, or any of these other ones that died before they had secondary products, because they all died before they had secondary products. So
right,
yeah, you just kind of have to lean on Magic and things like that, and those are the ones I think that are easy to kind of steal from.
Yeah, I agree, and that's part of it. Now, like, there were some really cool things that were built in like card games like Versus System, right?
Yeah.
But the problem was they were always almost to the letter untenable. Like, Versus System just hemorrhaged money in an effort to use that as a method to get their game over, and that didn't work. So like I would go to I wouldn't go to them because I didn't play competitively. I've only played a few games of Versus in my life, but I had a lot of friends that played the game competitively, and I would witness or hear them talk of these just pure collusion because there was a points-based qualification system. And it's like, hey, who needs what points? Oh, okay, so you're first, you're second, you're third. Now we're all qualified. And it's just, and we'll chop the money. And it's like, the fuck? You can't do shit like that. Like, that's not healthy at all.
No. It was
but I
kind of like that with spoils too.
Was it?
Yeah.
I'm very unfamiliar with spoils when it comes to their competitive play at the very least. So that's interesting in and of itself. I'll have to kind of dive into that to see about that. But yeah, sorry, Lou, that we don't have a lot from other card games, but we gave you what we could.
Yeah, I mean there is like follow up to it, so part of it's not necessarily card game stuff. I think it really circles back onto our second listener question quite well, because the second listener question, the I don't know if this is the OG wizard or Theog wizard. I'm gonna go with the OG wizard because that sounds way more gangster.
So we have determined through a lot of different trial and error that the actual name is Theo G. Wizard. Full name Theodore Griswold Wizard, as that is what made the most sense to us when we read the name at first. Now, I will preface, I will go ahead and admit fully that I was hammered when I came up with that being the headcanon that is Theo G. Wizard. It is meant to be the OG Wizard.
I was just going to say, what if it's Theodore Griswold, who is a wizard, but he also happens to be the OG wizard, and you're just double right?
There is that. I don't know. Like, I actually do know the real answer because it was corrected. And by corrected, I mean they made it so that there were some I'm going to call them unfortunate. I'm going to say that they had some they tried to make it into something they shouldn't have because of a misunderstanding in general of what they, or how they what's the best way to put this? How they address themselves. But the OG wizard is the correct per the person involved nomenclature. However, the headcanon of Theo G. Wizard will never, or that Theo Griswold Wizard will never leave my head.
Let me just say, it is an honor for Charmander to slaughter your name. So just know that, all right? If Chamber ever gets your name wrong, then you're just part of the club. That's all I'm saying.
Charger would never do that on purpose, right?
No. So anyway, the question was, do you feel like Flesh and Blood should do an animated series with the lore? And so the reason that I wanted to transition to this, talking about products we would like to see, is because I think that this is still a product I would like to see, even if it's not necessarily cards. And I think that it perfectly piggybacks off of what I said during last week's episode, which is give me more of the world one way or the other. So yes, I'd love to see an animated series. I want to see a live action movie. I want to see books. I want to see graphic novels. I want to see all of it. And I've been even thinking about it further, because not only is it just more ways to fall in love with the characters we already know and love, but from a marketing standpoint, how cool would it be if you had, some weekly animated show or whatever, and you introduce a character on the show, and then like 6 months later, you see them on the key art for the upcoming set, and it's like some character you fell in love with from the show. Like, how much more jacked or excited are you going to be for that set release because you're finally getting to play as the hero you fell in love with in the book, in the show, on the whatever, right? Like the preemptive marketing for heroes that might still be in design is, I think, a beautiful opportunity for LSS, and something that I would love to see them take advantage of.
Yeah, I think that's very that's a very bright response. You look at just even the reaction we've gotten to Lena Bell, and she's been in a story that is a heartwarming tale. However, people are talking about Lena Bell. There is precedent existing otherwise. Harley Quinn originally appeared in Batman the Animated Series, and then made her appearance in the comic books years later, and has become one of the most beloved characters after 30 years of that exists in DC. Same story with X-23. She was from X-Men Evolution, and eventually was then brought into the comic books.
I mean, she was technically from NYX.
No, she was actually in X-Men Evolution first.
I mean, she was, but I mean, she
then
was
NYX,
in NYX, and people didn't make the connection like right away. Because it was way under ordered. I remember that was a big scandal because they were like, wait, is this the same one? Because none of the distribution marketing said, by the way, this is her. They just sprung it on you. So
and it was a last panel of the book she appeared in, like it was last few panels or last few pages,
and it was historically like one of the most under ordered things in a series is once you get to issue 3 or later, and it was exactly 3. So
it was 3.
Yeah, in comics, everybody orders like a lot of number 1, and then they do a fair number of number 2s, just because like if the book does well, a lot of people have less number 2s, right? Because everyone buys the number 1s naturally, and then by the time you get to 3, it's only your diehards that have it, and so. Of course, that's the book, right? It was NYX number 3.
It's amazing because I was actually in on NYX on 1 and have the entire series.
I actually liked that series.
I thought it was really good. But yeah, so there is precedent for what you're talking about. And I to answer Theodore's question, yes, they should do an animated series. They should do. There are so many things they should be doing with this IP. It is not a short list. And if you look at God damn it, this is really fucking horrible. No free ads. But if you look at Elaine Hammondtree's Twitter, one of the things that Elaine brought up is what Fab merch would you like to see? And there are so many responses in that thread, and all of them it's like, well, that's kind of cool. Yeah, that's okay. That'd be dope. And you're just kind of going through it. And even the troll responses, you're like, well, that would actually sell. So it's
I was
like
dead serious about my reply, mind you.
I don't remember what yours was.
Bravo body pillow.
Oh, right. Yeah, but we already know a guy for that. So Gary, if you're listening, hook our boy up. But but no, like, so somebody said action figures. Shit, I've got a curio cabinet behind me full of action figures, of Marvel action figures. I'd get another curio cabinet and fill it with flesh and blood action figures. Like, that's not
action figures,
that's not
statues, busts. Like,
mine was cold foil wall art. Like, give me poster sized cold foil. Like, let me have that shit, because I will pay way too much money and then pay even more too much money to frame it, and I will hang it in my house. Like, do that stuff. Like, pull those triggers, because that's one, you're printing money. 2, you're doing the thing that is vital to anything that is, as you put it, hero centric. You're building connections. Humans survive, thrive, and relate to connections. So creating more connective tissue is unreal. Again, God fucking damn it, no free ads. But out there in the Twitterverse is what's your main in all of these? Right? And just seeing how people connect to those things that they consider to be their mains, their things that they do the most, tells you that they will continue to keep buying things that show what they identify with. Like, people that played a rogue in WoW will still wear rogue t-shirts to this day, right?
Oh man, I just realized that there's like a weird side project that I want to do now just because it's going to make me happy. I want to take the zodiac signs and then attribute each zodiac sign to a flesh and blood hero. And we're gonna treat it like it's real astrology, but it'll be fabrology.
Fabrology?
Like, yeah, you were born in May. Oh, you're a dash, huh? Like, we're gonna and then it'll be personality quirks of the hero. I'm totally
so
behind that.
If we don't have a Pro Tour announcement by the time we record next, we're spending 20 minutes on fabrology. So LSS, you've been warned.
Yeah,
at this point.
we'll do it.
We will fucking do it. I am not scared. I will do Fabrology, and it will be god awful. There will be so many disagreements.
Jokes aside, I would legitimately get a deck of tarot cards with Flesh and Blood artwork.
Okay.
Add that to my my responses in that Twitter thing. I think that would be kind of neat.
Yeah, you should. Yeah, make sure you go in there and do it, because I'm sure you'll get some interesting responses.
Well, I'm sure, but I just like think of how cool it would be to have like Prism as like the, you know, Queen of Cups or whatever,
or Kasai as the Three of Swords or whatever it is. But yeah, no, that makes sense. And so yes, they definitely should be doing more to leverage their IP. And I think that I know we've talked about this a lot, and not so much Charmer, but in previous shows. I mean, we're in 58 weeks, but there is a real suffering from your success issue with LSS. I 100% believe they did not expect to be where they are now. And the fact that they are is a testament to what they put into it and the good things that they thought of doing. However, they are often in danger of squandering that goodwill by doing things like we've talked about. I know when the next set's coming out, but I don't know where the Pro Tour is. Like, that doesn't help the competitive side of us very well at all. And I get it. You're dealing with the logistical nightmare of being on another continent in other time zones with an uncertain global perspective. And I 100% get it. But you're at the point now that the free passes are going to start wearing out. And if that means that you need a North American satellite office, sure. If that means that you just need more staff, sure. I don't doubt, and you said something earlier, and I forgot to really touch on it at the time, but it resonates pretty heavily. There is no doubt in any of our minds that LSS doesn't mean well. Their hearts are always in the right spot. They are not WotC. They are not sitting there and saying, we don't give a fuck about players, give us money. They care about growing the game, growing the community, and providing the best experience. And so that is a lot of goodwill. But we are getting very close to that goodwill running out for a lot of people who are who actively want to organize their free time and their life within their free time around this game. So honestly, they've got to start being better, and it's got to start soon.
Yeah. I think that's, again, valid criticism. I think that's fair. I also think that I know for a fact, for example, that I give them probably more leeway or a longer leash than some do, just because I can empathize with trying to give up some level of control when something's been your baby for a long time. And the reality is yes, LSS probably did not expect it to be this successful, but even more so, it's been a small team for a very long time. And when you look at somebody like James, where, you know, he's been designing stuff and it's been his baby for years and years and years at this point. So like, it's very easy for me, the fan, to say like, oh yeah, give me books, give me shows, give me all of these cool things. But if it's been that close to your heart for so long and you have a vision, letting go, or even just assigning other people to oversee like the day-to-day management of controlling something like that, because there's no way James has the time to do that all himself. That's hard. And so like, I get it. And I know that logistically there's all those hurdles, but I also very frequently will think about how hard it must be for the people who've been intimately involved for a long time with the game to let other people into the circle, if that makes sense, right? Because they're a small team that we all know. I mean, there's no way around it. We all know they need to grow, right? They need more bodies just to help them get more done. But making sure it's the right people who are going to do the right things and treat the players the right ways and treat the IP with the respect it deserves, all that stuff is difficult. So I get it. And I also know, again, it's not even just they're on another continent, but New Zealand specifically, because I've tried to immigrate there a couple of times, they've got some really tough like immigration policies. If you're not a native New Zealander and you are being hired for one of their jobs or you want to move out there, there's a lot of hurdles that you have to go through. And so even if they do have outside talent that they want to hire, they might be in the process of doing that when we would never know, because it might even legitimately just be taking a year or two to go through like immigration lawyers and whatever. So I know that I personally probably give them more like leeway than others because I think about those things, but that doesn't mean that everybody else needs to make those sacrifices. As you said, people are trying to plan their lives around it. They're saving vacation days. They are, trying to make content for the game for, I think about people like Flake, who I love, like this is his career, right? So he needs some stability and some certainty. And so the longer that they drag their feet, even if they mean well, and even if there are legitimate reasons for the slowness, some people are going to have to start looking in other directions. And so I feel it. And I don't have a good answer for them, unfortunately, other than, you know how to get a hold of me if you need help. But
I mean, we're pretty easy to find.
But yeah, like those are things that I do think about from time to time, because I want so much more. But if I was on the other side, right? If I was James and I was like, okay, I need to hire somebody to like write a book about my beloved characters, like how do I find the right person?
Sure.
Like that's hard.
No, I agree. So I think that you hit the nail on the head. I feel like there is some of that. There is some of the not wanting to let go of a certain modicum of control. And I do understand. Like I get that part. But as somebody who wants to be more involved, you've got to give me something to be involved with. Like that's it. And it gets exhausting for me at least. I mean, exhausting is the wrong word. To try to come up with something to talk about every week. And when the news cycle is going, when there's stuff going on, this is an easy show to do, in the realm of having stuff to talk about and filling the time with something that feels relevant, with something that feels like it has substance that people will want to hear, is way, way easier when there's something to talk about. And right now, the only thing to talk about is how we don't know.
The only thing to talk about is Marvel Snap. Because we're a Snapcast.
Oh, so okay, people. I wanted to point something out. We're both Midwesterners. Me specifically an Iowan. Darick is a Michigander. Is that the correct term? Yeah. Okay, good.
I mean, there's some internal conflict between Michigander and Michiganian, but I'm team Michigander.
You're not a Uber. That's all that matters.
No, I'm a troll.
Yeah, you're a troll. You live beneath the bridge. And so in our feedback channel on the Discord, which the link for the Discord will be in the show notes, one of our listeners, after our brief foray into discussing Snap last week, said, and I quote, "Stay a fab podcast and stay away from Snap." So, being Midwesterners, we don't like being told what to do. And now, because of that, welcome to Snap and Fap.
We're going to talk about the news in Marvel Snap.
We are going to talk about the news in Marvel Snap because go fuck yourself. That's why. And it's because we can, and it's our show.
They said don't do it, and we doubled the cubes. That's what happened.
Immediately Snap. Just you're losing 8. So just some quick hitters here. We've got some revisions coming in Marvel Snap. And the funny part about this is there's actually the crossover between Marvel Snap and Flesh and Blood is quite large. So we're not going to lose many people in this.
Yeah, there's quite a few people who play both, but also the crossover is perfect timing because there's not much Flesh and Blood news, and there's lots of Marvel Snap news. So
right, we're doing it.
We're doing it.
So first off, leader has been a hot topic of discussion. So we have a confirmed leader power reduction coming. But the best part of the announcement regarding leader was that they specifically said, we're not done with this card. And that is what I find interesting, because that leads me to believe they're going to make wholesale changes to this card. What do you think the wholesale changes are going to be?
I think that they could go a number of different ways. I will say that whatever it is, it will be a change to the functionality. So from just my experience with covering digital card games for as long as I have, the reason that they do something like this is because coding wise, it's much easier for them to make a quick power change and get that through Q&A than it is to actually change the way a card works, because you have to like recode and re-Q&A all of that, right? So we're getting a power adjustment now, and then they're gonna work on whatever the actual fundamental change is later. So knowing that it's a fundamental change, it could be, I've seen a lot of good suggestions, but it could be something like it copies cards but no unreveal effects of those cards. It could be that it copies cards but only copies the base value. So if you're playing any buffed versions, for example, they don't get the buffs as well. Because like one of the complaints, just as an example, is that right now, depending on sequencing, because it doesn't happen every time, that's the other problem with leader, is he's really nuanced, and I think that confuses people. But depending on when the reveal order happens, sometimes if your opponent gets a Wolf's Bane that's normally a 3-1 but sometimes enters as a 3-7 if it's in a full lane, sometimes you get the 3-7 as well, or you get the 3-7 and then the trigger again, right? So you get double value because of the order, and that just feels unintuitive and it feels wrong. So I could see them saying, okay, you only get the base copy of cards to avoid that, or you don't get the on reveal effects of cards to avoid that. Another change that I had seen that I really liked was to give it the magic treatment, which is that instead you can only play it on round 5, so that it re-incentivizes people playing those big 6 costs. Because like right now, there's a lot of 6 costs that used to see a lot of play that kind of fell off the radar, because it's like, why do I want to take a turn off to set up an infinite play when my opponent can play something on 5 and then leader on top of it, right?
Yep.
No reason for me to ever make that play anymore. So I think that whatever it is, it's going to be something that likely simplify. I can't even speak, and I'm not even one mojito in. I think it's going to be something that simplifies leaders' mechanics, because I do think that a lot of the frustration comes from not understanding the nuance, because leader is actually the kind of card right now that good players know how to play around leader, and good players even can go as far as to say, hey, based on who is revealing first and what cards are going to reveal, I can either minimize or maximize the value of a leader here, right? But people who are playing casually are probably just, if I'm being honest, confused as fuck by leader half the time. So I think that whatever they do to him, they're going to streamline and simplify it so that the outcomes are expected outcomes, and also ones that just don't feel, for lack of a better term, cheaty, like the Wolf's Bane, where it, they get a 7, but then you get, the 14 or 13 or whatever. So I think that that's likely going to be how they address it, but in what capacity, I don't know.
Yeah, I think single lane copy is really the other one that is your best bet, is just reduce what it can copy. I think that helps a lot too. Then we're also getting a revision to collector's tokens, so we'll end up getting 200 per chest, and 2 to 600 per chest instead of the piddly version right now. I have a pinned Darkhawk. I'm 1/6 of the way there. I'm well on the way.
I just finally, the very first card I pinned was Galactus, and I just got Galactus.
Oh, I saw.
And then I'm up like 110 cubes in the last 24
Uh-huh.
hours since getting him because he is busted.
Yeah, busted in half. They've even changed that card and it's still busted.
Yeah, well, change hasn't went into effect yet, but yeah, he's getting a power reduction as well. He's going to go from 3 to 2. But I will say I'm not playing him the way most people are. I am still running like half of the death combo that most decks run him with, but I've been doing this weird Iron Fist with Spider-Man combo.
I saw that. It's Jesus, that's dirty.
Yeah, it's so dirty. So if you're not familiar, when you're at 5, you use Iron Fist and then Spider-Man on a lane that you are setting up your Galactus, because then Iron Fist kicks Spider-Man over and they can't play to the lane where you're going to Galactus, and then you just steal the lane. And then usually for like the setups, I run in both of the goblins, so you try to jam them into the lane that you want to steal. And then I'm also running Wolverine, because if he's in a side lane, then he obviously jumps into where Galactus is. So you can go, if they do have a little bit of power there, you can still go over the top. But the number of like 8 cube wins I've gotten because people just don't see
the Galactus coming.
Yeah, they're like, oh, they're playing like Iron Fist and Spider-Man. I don't know what. I get it
shit.
now. So, yeah, I've gained like 110 cubes in the last 24 hours or so. It's been absurd.
That's a lot. All right. Okay. Well, I think it's time to get out of here. We've talked enough about things that aren't flesh and blood. And
no free advertising.
No, aside from all the free advertising we did today, no free ads.
I don't know if you know this or not, but FAP stands for Free Advertising Podcast.
Oh my fucking God, I hate you so much right now. Oh, Jesus. You piece of shit. Why did I invite you?
To give me free advertising.
To get, God damn it. Fine. Let's do some Patreon shoutouts, shall we? We have one associate producer, and that would be Andy. Our executive producers and on up, we have Chris, May, Philip, Taylor, Ed, Josh, Kenny, Nick, Teague, and Michael. If you are interested, you can go to patreon.com/fleshandpod. The link will be in the show notes. We have 4 tiers for you to check out. You can find us everywhere on SoundCloud, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, anywhere you'll find us. I apologize for our new YouTube listeners. I did not get it on YouTube this week because I'm still trying to figure out a lot of this production stuff. So please bear with me. I'll have it on YouTube this week as well. But yes, you can find us basically anywhere that you can find podcasts and or video related content. You can also email us at fleshandpod@gmail.com. You can also find us on Twitter @fleshpod. Again, all links are in the show notes. Darick, where can they find you?
Here next week, and here every week after, hopefully, and on some sort of Alpha Clash podcast in the future, I'm sure.
Probably going to happen.
I'm Charmer just about everywhere, and the places I'm not, I'm that Charmer. But let's be honest, like I'm the only idiot that's doing Charm 3R, so it's Charm 3R, not Charmander, not Chamber, not Charger, not Chandler,
Chaser.
Charmer. Yeah, sure. Chaucer.
Oh, Chaucer's pretty good. I like that. Yeah, not Chaucer. Chaucer. Yeah. Okay, so that's great. Well, you can find me on Twitter @Logan Peterson. It's mostly bitching about how I don't know where the Pro Tour is, or talking about Alpha Clash recently. And because, again, I just discovered that game's pretty good. So also, if you can also find me in our Discord, I'm very active in there, talking about everything, including Alpha Clash, including Marvel Snap, including everything that we really talked about today, except for Duckman. I haven't brought Duckman up in the Discord yet. I'm going to have to go ahead and put some Duckman related content in there. But if you're interested in joining our Discord, that link will also be in the show notes. But as for that, we will talk to you all next week. Bye.